James, who turned 18 in December 2025, has only recently begun embracing the attention that comes with his role in the royal family. The freshly graduated teen is the son of Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, the youngest brother of King Charles, and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh.
A massive shift inside the British monarchy is finally unfolding. And once the letters patent are officially sealed and the palace confirms the move publicly, the institution will never look exactly the same again. This is not some quick royal update people forget about after one news cycle. The scale of this moment reaches far beyond tabloid headlines, documentaries, or endless royal debates about the future of the crown. For years, the monarchy has faced enormous pressure from non-stop media attention, public disagreements, and constant scrutiny. Every interview, every appearance, and every family conflict became global entertainment almost instantly. Critics questioned whether the institution was losing stability, while supporters worried tradition itself was slowly being overwhelmed by celebrity culture and public drama. Yet while attention stayed focused on controversy, something much quieter was developing behind palace walls. A young royal was preparing carefully and patiently for a future role that would eventually place him near the centre of the monarchy's next chapter. James Alexander, Philip Theo Mountbatten-Windsor, the Earl of Wessex, has now accepted the title of Prince, and many royal observers believe the decision carries enormous symbolic meaning. He has not simply accepted a title. He has stepped into a legacy connected to discipline, restraint, service, and institutional duty. This moment feels important because James approached royal life very differently from many modern public figures. He did not aggressively seek headlines or constant visibility. He did not build attention around personal publicity. Instead, he spent years learning quietly about the institution itself, and that patience now makes his rise feel far more significant to many royal supporters. And that leads directly to the question people keep asking right now. Why does this specific royal moment matter so much? Princes have existed throughout British history. Royal titles are nothing new. So why are commentators suddenly speaking about James as though he represents something larger than ceremonial tradition alone? The answer goes beyond paperwork or palace procedure. To many people, this feels symbolic because it completes a story that began years ago, far away from cameras, during quiet moments at Balmoral beside the River Dee. That was where Prince Philip reportedly spent long periods teaching James lessons centered around patience, observation, and self-control. Those fishing trips may have looked ordinary from the outside, but supporters now view them as deeply important. Prince Philip valued discipline and purpose in nearly everything he did. When he taught James fly fishing, many believe he was passing down more than a hobby. He was teaching a philosophy of leadership based on calmness, restraint, and awareness. And today, many people believe those lessons are visible in James himself. Even his full name carries symbolic weight. James Alexander Philip Theo. The inclusion of Philip immediately stands out because Prince Philip's influence inside the monarchy lasted for decades. He was seen as one of the institution's strongest structural forces, helping maintain discipline and stability during periods of enormous public pressure. He was not always universally loved by the press, but few doubted his importance behind palace walls. And now, as James steps formally into princely status, many royal supporters see a continuation of those same values through another generation. What makes the story even more interesting is how deliberately James was kept away from intense public exposure while growing up. Compared to many younger royals, he spent years almost invisible to the broader public. That was not accidental. It came directly from decisions made by Prince Edward and Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, who wanted their children raised differently from the traditional royal model. At the time, many questioned that approach. Some thought it limited their children's public role too much. Others believed it was unusual not to fully embrace princely styling during childhood. But years later, many royal commentators now believe that decision helped shape James into somebody unusually grounded for a member of the royal family. He experienced life in a more ordinary way than people expected from somebody connected to such a famous institution. He learned how to interact naturally with people outside royal ceremony and status. That matters because it creates a completely different outlook on public life. And Sophie's role in that process cannot be ignored. Across Britain, many royal observers now describe Sophie as one of the monarchy's smartest long-term thinkers. She rarely dominates headlines herself, but her influence has become increasingly noticeable over time. Early in her marriage, she and Edward decided their children would not automatically grow up surrounded by full royal privilege and non-stop ceremonial treatment. That decision changed James's upbringing significantly. Instead of living entirely inside aristocratic insulation, he experienced situations many royal children rarely encounter directly. He used public transportation, stood in lines, and interacted with people without always being introduced first through a royal title. Those experiences helped build confidence rooted in ordinary social interaction rather than automatic deference. That difference matters psychologically. One child grows up expecting the world to adjust around status. Another learns that respect still has to be earned through behavior and character. Those two experiences often create very different adults. That is one reason so many people now describe James as authentic and grounded, despite being born into extraordinary privilege. The image he projects feels believable because it appears shaped through actual life experience, rather than image management alone. Sophie seemed to understand years ago that the monarchy's future would eventually depend on royals who felt more relatable to the public. And now, as James steps into a larger role, that authenticity may become one of the institution's biggest advantages moving forward. The connection between James and Prince Philip also explains why Balmoral remains such a major part of this story. Those fishing lessons represented an entire mindset built around patience and self-control. Fly fishing requires concentration, stillness, and awareness. There are no shortcuts. The river reveals nothing to impatient people. Prince Philip respected activities demanding discipline because they reflected qualities he valued personally. And many supporters now believe James absorbed those lessons deeply over the years. Unlike many modern public figures, he has shown little interest in rushing toward attention or status. Under existing royal rules, James already had the right to accept princely status earlier if he wanted. Nobody forced him to wait, yet he waited anyway. That restraint has become one of the most discussed aspects of the story. Palace reports repeatedly suggested James preferred to observe quietly, mature properly, and understand the institution before stepping fully into a larger public role. In a culture where visibility is often chased immediately, that level of patience feels unusual, and that is why his decision now resonates so strongly with many people. It sends a message centered around readiness instead of entitlement, around service instead of publicity, around responsibility instead of constant self-promotion. Inside Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, and Kensington Palace, discussions about the monarchy's future have reportedly intensified for years. The institution understands public expectations have changed dramatically. Many people now want royals who appear disciplined, useful, and genuinely connected to ordinary experiences. James seems positioned perfectly for that environment. His story also feels dramatically different from many royal narratives dominating the past decade. So much recent royal coverage revolved around disputes, emotional conflict, and public controversy. But James represents almost the opposite energy entirely. Quietness instead of chaos, patience instead of urgency, stability instead of spectacle. That contrast is becoming impossible to ignore. In many ways, his acceptance of the title feels like the monarchy slowly moving back towards steadiness after years of turbulence. It feels calmer, more deliberate, and more focused on long-term stability than short-term publicity. And perhaps that is exactly why this moment resonates so strongly right now. Because many people are exhausted by non-stop conflict and endless public drama. James arrives at a moment when calmness itself suddenly feels refreshing again. His measured approach makes him stand out precisely because he does not behave like somebody constantly chasing attention. And maybe Prince Philip recognized that quality years ago beside the River Dee at Balmoral. Maybe those long afternoons were never random at all. Maybe the old Duke saw in James the same discipline, restraint, and sense of duty that defined much of his own life inside the monarchy. Because in the end, fly fishing was never just a sport to Prince Philip. It was a lesson in patience, awareness, and control. It taught somebody how to remain steady even while the current beneath them keeps shifting. And now, as James Alexander Philip Theo Mountbatten Windsor steps officially into this new chapter of royal life, those lessons seem more important than ever before. Far away from the cameras and the non-stop royal headlines, some of the most important lessons shaping James Alexander happened during those freezing afternoons beside the River Dee at Balmoral. The Highland air carried the smell of pine and wet earth, while Prince Philip stood beside his youngest grandson, watching carefully as James learned the patience and silence that defined the old Duke himself. Those moments looked simple from the outside, but inside the monarchy, they now feel incredibly important. James absorbed everything quietly. He learned how to study the environment instead of trying to control it. He learned that you do not fight the current recklessly. You observe it, understand it, and move with it rather than against it. Those lessons became part of his personality long before the public ever noticed him. And honestly, people are now starting to understand just how deeply those experiences shaped him. The calmness the world sees during state ceremonies did not appear overnight. That composure was built slowly beside cold Scottish rivers where silence mattered more than performance. Veteran royal correspondents have openly admitted they were surprised by how controlled and focused James appeared during recent high-profile events. When he walks into a room, he does not rush to dominate attention. His eyes move carefully across conversations and reactions, almost studying the atmosphere before speaking. That level of observation mirrors the same discipline fly fishing demands. Prince Philip was not simply teaching his grandson a hobby. He was teaching him patience, emotional control, and the value of restraint. There is something genuinely emotional about that connection now that Prince Philip is gone. The monarchy lost one of its strongest figures when he passed away, and many inside palace circles still describe his absence as deeply significant. But in James Alexander, supporters of the crown now see a continuation of Philip's philosophy and discipline living on through another generation. So when James accepts the title of prince, many people believe he is completing something that started years ago beside that river in Scotland. Not just a transfer of titles or bloodline, but a transfer of values and character that Prince Philip quietly prepared long before the public realised it. Then came the moment that changed how millions of people viewed James forever. Inside Westminster Hall during the lying in state of Queen Elizabeth II, the world witnessed one of the most emotional royal events of modern history. The atmosphere inside that ancient hall carried enormous weight. Millions were watching live as members of the royal family stood vigil beside the late Queen's coffin. Every movement was being analysed, every expression mattered, and standing there among senior royals was 14-year-old James Alexander. Think about the pressure of that moment for a second. He was still a teenager, standing under global attention during one of the most historic royal events of the century. The grief, the history, and the emotional intensity inside Westminster Hall were overwhelming, even for experienced public figures. Yet James remained remarkably composed throughout the vigil. He did not appear distracted or nervous. He stood completely focused with his head bowed, maintaining a calm dignity that surprised many observers watching around the world. What stood out most was that his composure did not look forced or rehearsed. It looked natural, as though he instinctively understood the seriousness of the moment. That vigil changed the conversation about James permanently. Royal commentators who had rarely discussed him before suddenly started paying serious attention. Palace insiders reportedly noticed the same thing. This no longer looked like a young royal quietly staying in the background. It looked like somebody capable of carrying enormous responsibility with maturity far beyond his age. That curiosity only intensified during the South Africa tour, which many royal observers now describe as James's true introduction to the international stage. Until then, much of the public only knew him from ceremonial appearances. South Africa allowed people to watch how he interacted in real situations under intense global attention, and the response from journalists and observers was extremely positive. What stood out immediately was how differently James behaved compared to expectations surrounding younger royals. Instead of constantly placing himself at the center of attention, he often stepped slightly back during conversations and listened first. He seemed far more interested in understanding people than impressing them. That detail became one of the biggest talking points from the tour. His focus stayed on the people around him rather than on cameras or public performance. In diplomatic environments, that kind of active listening is considered an incredibly valuable skill because many public figures struggle to remain genuinely engaged while under pressure. Yet James appeared to handle it naturally. When he spoke, observers noticed he avoided sounding overly rehearsed or mechanical. Instead of relying on generic ceremonial phrases, he responded thoughtfully and showed genuine interest in what others were saying. Community leaders and conservation advocates repeatedly described their conversations with him as sincere and unexpectedly personal. Even veteran journalists covering the trip found themselves writing less about official speeches and more about the atmosphere surrounding him. Many struggled to explain it directly, but they kept returning to the same idea: presence, calmness, authenticity. Those qualities are difficult to fake, especially during a heavily scrutinized international tour. And once again, people connected those qualities directly back to Sophie's upbringing and Prince Philip's influence. For years, Sophie and Prince Edward intentionally raised their children away from non-stop royal celebrity culture. They wanted James to experience life more normally instead of growing up entirely inside royal insulation. Watching him during the South Africa tour, many observers realized that strategy had clearly worked. One of the most important details from that tour often gets overlooked. At the time, James was not officially styled as a prince. He attended as the Earl of Wessex, carrying aristocratic status but not the immediate symbolic authority attached to the HRH title. Yet, despite that, people responded warmly to him everywhere he went. The respect he received did not feel forced by hierarchy or ceremony. It felt earned naturally through his behavior, manners, and attentiveness. That distinction matters enormously because it suggests his appeal comes from character rather than title alone. Sophie and Edward spent years hoping their children would develop exactly that quality, and South Africa seemed to confirm it publicly on the world stage. Inside palace circles, that outcome reportedly strengthened confidence in James significantly. Because beneath all the royal tradition and ceremony exists a practical reality the monarchy constantly faces. The institution depends on working royals capable of handling public engagements, diplomatic responsibilities, overseas tours, and charitable work year after year. Those duties require discipline, emotional stability, and long-term loyalty under intense scrutiny. The departure of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex created additional strain on that system. Fewer active working royals meant greater pressure on the remaining senior members of the family. For years, discussions continued about how the monarchy would adapt operationally moving forward. But the challenge was never simply about numbers alone. It was about finding the right personalities to represent the institution effectively. The monarchy needed younger figures capable of balancing public connection with institutional discipline. People who could handle visibility without becoming consumed by celebrity culture. Individuals trusted not just with ceremonial appearances, but with the long-term stability of the crown itself. And the striking reality now becoming clearer inside royal circles is that the palace may have already found exactly what it was looking for. James Alexander's rise inside royal discussions did not happen suddenly. The signs appeared gradually over time. The Balmoral lessons, the composure at Westminster Hall, the calm confidence during the South Africa tour. Each moment revealed the same qualities repeatedly: patience, observation, discipline, duty before ego. And now, As he steps fully into a larger royal role, many inside the monarchy appear increasingly convinced that the young man who spent so long quietly learning in the background may become one of the institution's most important figures for the future. And what are those qualities? They are the same traits people spent decades associating with Prince Philip himself: discipline, loyalty, emotional control, quiet focus. James carries those same characteristics in a way that has reportedly impressed senior royal figures for years. At the same time, he also brings something more modern to the table. Because he spent much of his life growing up without full princely styling, he experienced a more grounded upbringing than many expected from somebody born into the royal family. He learned how to move through ordinary situations without relying on status to define him. That balance between royal responsibility and real-world understanding has become one of his biggest strengths. He also possesses a serious interest in science, technology, engineering, and environmental systems, and insiders reportedly see that as incredibly important for the monarchy's future. The royal family now operates in a world shaped by climate issues, technological change, and growing public skepticism toward old institutions. That means modern royals need more than ceremonial presence. They need genuine understanding of the issues people care about today. James reportedly approaches subjects like conservation and sustainability with an analytical mindset rather than simple publicity-driven engagement. His interest in military and defense matters is also said to go beyond ceremonial appearances. Palace figures believe he brings intellectual seriousness to conversations surrounding infrastructure, ecological systems, and institutional modernization. King Charles III reportedly recognizes enormous value in that. After spending decades advocating for sustainability and environmental awareness long before those topics became mainstream, the king now appears to see in James somebody capable of carrying those conversations into the next generation using modern language and modern understanding. But perhaps the most important relationship shaping James's future role is the one he shares with Prince William. Inside royal circles, many observers reportedly view their connection as one of the monarchy's most important internal partnerships moving forward. William has spent years navigating enormous institutional pressure with a shrinking circle of people he can trust completely. The future king requires allies who prioritize stability, duty, and long-term loyalty above publicity or personal narratives. According to palace insiders, James has become exactly that kind of figure. The age gap between them may appear large on paper, but many believe it actually creates the perfect dynamic. James is young enough to respect William's leadership naturally, while also being mature enough to provide meaningful support. That balance reportedly gives William something he has needed for years: somebody capable of standing beside him without creating rivalry or competition. Sources close to palace operations suggest William has taken a deeply personal interest in James's development beyond normal royal mentoring. He reportedly sees in James the kind of dependable support structure every future monarch needs. Not somebody interested in self-promotion, but somebody genuinely committed to the institution itself. And that matters because history shows monarchies survive through trusted support systems, not isolated individuals alone. The strongest royal eras were built around reliable inner circles, capable of protecting stability during moments of pressure and transition. Many royal commentators now believe James could become one of the most important figures in that structure during William's eventual reign. That is why his rise inside the monarchy has been handled so carefully and deliberately. Nothing about James's public role feels rushed. Palace officials did not suddenly flood the media with aggressive campaigns designed to manufacture popularity around him. Instead, his reputation developed gradually through consistent behavior, public appearances, and visible composure under pressure. That slow approach strengthened his credibility because people began forming opinions based on observation rather than promotion. And now that James has formally accepted the HRH style, and the title of prince, the practical consequences inside the monarchy become significant. First, it strengthens King Charles III's vision of a streamlined working monarchy built around a smaller core group of active royals carrying serious institutional responsibilities. James is no longer viewed as a peripheral figure standing outside that structure. He is now officially part of the monarchy's long-term operational future. Second, his acceptance of the title opens the door to greater involvement in royal duties, patronages, diplomatic work, and public representation connected to science, sustainability, education, and technological innovation. Because of his intellectual interests, many observers believe he will become heavily involved in areas tied directly to the monarchy's modern relevance. And third, perhaps most importantly, his emergence sends a message about the monarchy itself. For years, younger generations watched royal stories dominated by public conflict, media wars, personal grievances, and non-stop controversy. James represents a completely different image. He offers a story centered around restraint, preparation, loyalty, and service, rather than celebrity-style exposure. He had every opportunity to live privately and avoid the intense pressure surrounding royal life. Instead, he appears to have chosen duty knowingly and deliberately. That decision resonates strongly with many royal supporters because it feels rooted in responsibility rather than personal ambition. The palace also seems aware of how powerful that contrast has become. James's public role has not been marketed like celebrity entertainment or social media branding. Instead, his rise has unfolded slowly, quietly, and naturally through visible actions rather than dramatic announcements. That approach actually increased public fascination because people became curious about somebody who seemed uninterested in chasing attention constantly. And in many ways, that reflects Prince Philip's deeper legacy. Not merely titles or ceremonial appearances, but a philosophy centered around discipline, responsibility, and service beyond personal recognition. Many supporters believe James inherited exactly that mindset, not only through family connection, but through upbringing, mentorship, and personal choice. That is why so many royal watchers are paying close attention right now. To them, James does not simply represent another young prince entering public life. He represents reassurance during a period when the monarchy spent years facing questions about stability, relevance, and long-term direction. Whether those expectations ultimately prove accurate remains to be seen, of course. But the optimism surrounding him inside royal circles is very real. Because when people look at James Alexander Philip Theo Mountbatten Windsor, they see somebody who appears to have spent years preparing quietly for responsibility long before the world officially noticed him. In an era dominated by publicity, oversharing, and non-stop attention-seeking, that kind of quiet seriousness suddenly feels extremely rare again. Do you understand now why so many people inside the royal world believe this moment matters so much? It is not simply because James accepted a title. It is because many believe he earned the meaning behind that title long before he formally carried it. The monarchy has survived centuries of upheaval because each generation eventually found figures capable of stabilizing the institution when stability mattered most. Right now, many palace observers clearly believe James may become one of those figures for the modern era. The prince who spent years staying quiet has officially stepped into a larger role, and suddenly, the future direction of the House of Windsor feels far more secure to many people watching around the world. If you made it this far, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think James Alexander could become one of the most important royals of the next generation? Like, comment, and subscribe, because this story is only getting started, and the next chapter of the monarchy may end up being one of the most fascinating yet.